Introduction. Europe in the aftermath of World War II. Savage Continent by Keith Lowe. I'm just going to read part of the introduction since most of the people today did not live during this period, and people are taking world wars very seriously when what happened in World War II was so devastating, and a lot of it has been whitewashed or sanitized to some degree. So this book really, really says a lot about World War II and the horror and the sickness and the illness that was created. Imagine a world without institutions. It is a world where borders between countries seem to have dissolved, leaving a single, endless landscape over which people travel in search of communities that no longer exist. There are no governments anymore on either a national scale or even a local one. There are no schools or universities, no libraries or archives, no access to any information whatsoever. There is no cinema or theater, and certainly no television. Sipping my coffee. The radio occasionally works, but the signal is distant and almost always in a foreign language. No one has seen a newspaper for weeks. There are no railroads or motor vehicles, no telephones or telegrams, no post office, no communication at all except what is passed through word of mouth. There are no banks, but that is no great hardship because money no longer has any worth. There are no shops because no one has anything to sell. Nothing is made here. The great factories and businesses that used to exist have all been destroyed or dismantled, as have most of the other buildings. There are no tools, save what can be dug out of the rubbish. There is no food. Law and order are virtually non-existent because there is no police force and no judiciary. In some areas there no longer seems to be any clear sense of what is right and what is wrong. People help themselves to whatever they want without regard to ownership. Indeed, the sense of ownership itself has largely disappeared. Goods belong only to those who are strong enough to hold on to them and those who are willing to guard them with their lives. Men with weapons roam the streets, taking what they want and threatening anyone who gets in their way. Women of all classes and ages prostitute themselves for food and protection. There is no shame. There is no morality. There is only survival. For modern generations, it is difficult to picture such a world existing outside the imaginations of Hollywood scriptwriters. However, there are still hundreds of thousands of people alive today who experience exactly these conditions, not in far-flung corners of the globe, but at the heart of what has for decades been considered one of the most stable and developed regions on Earth. In 1944 and 1945, large parts of Europe were left in chaos for months at a time. The Second World War, easily the most destructive war in history, had devastated not only the physical infrastructure, but also the institutions that held countries together. The political system had broken down to such a degree that American observers were warning of the possibility of Europe-wide civil war. The deliberate fragmentation of communities had sown an irreversible mistrust between neighbors, and universal famine had made personal morality an irrelevance. Europe, claimed the New York Times in March 1945, is in a condition which no American can hope to understand. It was the new dark continent. That Europe managed to pull itself out of this mire and then go on to become a prosperous, tolerant continent seems nothing short of a miracle. Looking back on the feats of reconstruction that took place, the rebuilding of roads, railways, factories, even whole cities, it is tempting to see nothing but progress. The political rebirth that occurred in the West is likewise impressive, especially the rehabilitation of Germany, which transformed itself from a feral nation to a responsible member of the European family in just a few short years. A new desire for international cooperation was also born during the post-war years, which would bring not only prosperity but peace. The decade since 1945, yes, since 1945, had been hailed as the single longest period of international peace in Europe since the time of the Roman Empire. It is little wonder that those who write about the post-war era, historians, statesmen, and economists alike, often portray it as a time when Europe rose like a phoenix from the ashes of destruction. According to this point of view, the conclusion of war marked not only the end of repression and violence, but also the spiritual, moral, and economic rebirth of the whole continent. The Germans called the months after the war 0 hour, the implication being that it was a time when the slate was wiped clean and history allowed to start again.